All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Corinne Moss, and I'm a program manager at Mass CEC, and I'm managing our 40101D Grid Resilience program. So I'm joined today by the rest of our 40101D team as well. So we've got Sarah Cullinan, our senior program director, Jacob Chaplin, our program administrator, and Maya Mastro, our fellow. So we're really excited to have opened up the RFP for this program, and I'm excited to walk you through it. So just to give a quick intro about the 40101D program, it's a federal formula grant opportunity aimed at preventing outages and enhancing the resilience of the electric grid. It was established by the 2021 Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, or IIJA, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. As you've seen, the webinar is being recorded, so this will be available on our website after we're finished. All right. So before we get into the 40101D program, I just wanted to give a quick overview of the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center for any of those of you who aren't familiar with us. So Mass CEC is a quasi-state clean energy economic development agency. Our mission is to accelerate the clean energy and climate solution that Mass CEC, or that the Commonwealth will need to reach our clean energy goals. And we are focused on prioritizing the DEI, environmental justice, and equity in all aspects of our work and programming. All right. All right, so just to give you some background about the 40101D programming. So like I said, this is a federal formula funding opportunity meant to enhance the resilience and reliability of the electric grid. So formula funding means that this program is available to all states plus territories and tribes. It's non-competitive, so each jurisdiction is allotted a certain amount of money that will be eligible for each year. It's a period of 5 years of funding. Throughout that time period, Massachusetts is eligible for approximately $4.5 million a year. And this will occur between fiscal years 2022 and fiscal years 2026. The period of performance for these grants is about 5 years. However, awards may be expanded to span the amount of time necessary for all project activities to be completed up to 10 years. So this will be an ongoing effort that Mass CEC is undertaking over the next several years. So the goals of the funding are to enhance the resilience and reliability of the electric grid, prevent outages, and mitigate the impact of disruptive events on the electric system. So those are like the DOE requirements and background of the program. And then for the Massachusetts administration of this program, so far, we've been awarded 2 years of funding, totaling $9.2 million, and that's what's available in the RFP that we've just released. We have submitted our application for a 3rd year of funding. That's for another $4.3 million, and we're expecting notification about that award later this summer. So in addition to DOE's goals, Mass CEC, in collaboration with the Department of Energy Resources, developed the following program objectives, which are to improve energy reliability and resilience, support the Commonwealth's decarbonization efforts, advance environmental justice, and create good-paying clean energy jobs. Just a couple of other things that I want to note about our program. So we haven't designed the program to focus on enhancing resilience and specifically building level resilience, so thinking about solutions like microgrids. However, as we'll see later in the presentation, there are a whole host of activities that are considered eligible for this funding by DOE, and we'll be considering applications that address any of those eligible activities. Massachusetts is also encouraging applications for projects that have been designed in collaboration with communities, and partnerships with community-based organizations are strongly encouraged. So just wanted to note those things as we're starting to think about the program. So DOE has defined the following entities as being eligible to receive funding from this program. So these are electric grid operators, electricity storage operators, electricity generators, transmission owners or operators, distribution providers, and fuel suppliers. DOE doesn't issue any other sort of guidance about what types of organizations fall into these entities, so entities can self-determine what type of eligible entity they are. If you're interested in applying for this funding opportunity, but are not one of the types of eligible entities listed here, there is an option to apply as another relevant entity. However, that would require approval by the Secretary of DOE. So if you're interested in pursuing this avenue, please just get in touch with us and we can work with you through that process. DOE has also defined these eligible activities as potential uses for this funding. So I'll just give folks a moment to read through the eligible activities on this slide. All right, I think we can go to the next slide. So each subaward in this program is required to contribute some sort of cost match, and this is required by DOE. So DOE has split types of eligible entities into two categories, small and large. So DOE has defined small entities as eligible subawardees that do not sell more than 4 million megawatt hours of electricity annually, and large entities as those that sell more than 4 million megawatt hours of electricity annually, or that do not sell electricity. So, oh, whoops, sorry, I thought this was the cost match slide. We'll get to that next. This is the small utility set aside. So DOE also requires that that states set aside a proportionate amount of funding to the amount of customers served by small utilities. So in Massachusetts, this is approximately 59%. I know this number might seem a little bit large. This was determined using forms submitted to the Energy Information Administration, or the EIA. And those forms are available on our website if anyone is interested in learning more about how these determinations were made. Also happy to answer questions about it. So just to reiterate, approximately 59% of the funding from this program will be set aside for entities in like the small category. All right, now on to the cost match. So cost match is required for all subawardees per federal requirements. And these are also divided by small and large entities. So for large entities, the required cost match will be between 100 and 115% of the award. And for small entities, the required cost match will be between 1/3 and 1/3 plus 15% of the award. The required cost match within these specified ranges will be determined upon subaward notification. And just to give a little bit more information about how these numbers were determined, DOE requires a minimum of 100% cost match for large entities and 1/3 cost match for small entities. And then Mass CEC may require an additional up to an additional 15% cost match. So just to give folks a sense of the program history and where we are, the program has been in development since January 2023. Since then, we've opened a couple of opportunities for public comment in development of this program. So notably, we released draft program guidelines in winter 2024 and incorporated feedback that we received on those guidelines into the final program design. Next slide, please. And just to give you a sense of where we are now, we've just released our request for proposals, as I mentioned. We'll go over the specific application timeline in a moment, but what I just wanted to highlight here is that, as I've noted, that this is an ongoing program, and we're expecting that this is just the first round of solicitations for this funding. So we're anticipating opening the application period for applications semi-annually until the funding is exhausted. And then just to go over the program timeline for this application cycle, we are accepting questions about the RFP through today, and then we'll be posting answers to all of the questions that we received both via email and on this webinar by August 2nd. Important date, proposals are due to our grid@masscec inbox on October 4th, 2024. We anticipate that we may require interviews with top applicants. If we do, those would occur 2 to 4 weeks after the application deadline. And then the way the application review process will work is that MassCEC will review all of the applications and make recommendations to DOE about which projects should be awarded. We'll be submitting our recommendations to DOE about 6 to 8 weeks after that application deadline. And then no projects will be formally awarded until they've been approved by DOE. We expect that this could take up to 4 to 6 months. We're hoping it won't take quite that long, but just wanted to build in a buffer pending DOE review timelines. And then once DOE has formally approved all of the recommended projects can then go through contracting and begin work. All right. So just wanted to go over quickly the application materials that will be required for the grants. So you'll notice that there's a mix of requirements that MassCEC has created and also federal requirements. So each of the forms listed here has instructions about how to complete them, but please feel free to reach out with any questions if anything is confusing. Basically, what we're looking for is a summary of the project, how the money will be used, how communities will be engaged, what types of benefits will come out of the projects, what types of project steps will be taken throughout the project period, project budget, how benefits and progress will be measured via metrics, and cost match commitment and support. One thing that I wanted to note is that we've heard from DOE that thorough is better, particularly with the NEPA environmental questionnaire. There have been some delays in approving subawards because that process is just taking a while, and having a really thorough application document as part of that will help expedite the review process. So just a nod to be as thorough as possible. So also just wanted to note that the list of required materials is can be found in a couple of places. So we will be sending around these slides and posting them to our website. There's also a list of required application materials on our website. And then there's also an application checklist in the application cover sheet or attachment A. So it should be pretty clear of what's required. And then there are also a few optional documents depending on individual circumstances. And then we also have provided some reference materials to help for transparency. So in that, we've included the scoring rubric that we'll be using so that you all can get a sense of what we'll be looking for. That will be Mass CEC's internal scoring rubric. And then we've also posted the reporting templates that will be required of subawardees by DOE. So there are quarterly and annual reporting requirements for these projects. And just wanted folks to be able to see those requirements ahead of time. All right, so that concludes the content portion of the webinar. Just another nod to questions. If you have written questions that you'd like to submit, please email them to the Grid inbox by the end of the day today. We'll be posting answers to all the questions that we receive via email, and then also all of the questions that we receive during this session by August 2nd. And please, I know we have some questions coming in already. Please feel free to throw them in the chat, use the raised hand function, and we'll have a good amount of time to go through and answer questions. So I'll start with one that I see in the chat. Can you show how 59% is small entities? When you look at maps, it looks like Eversource and National Grid cover much of Massachusetts. Yes, that's correct. So because the cutoff is 4 million megawatt hours, it's actually quite a high threshold of electricity sales, and even our large EDCs don't always meet that. I'm forgetting which EDC, Sarah, do you remember, didn't meet it this year? Oh, I don't think your sound is working. One other thing I'll say while Sarah's figuring out her sound is that the large EDCs in Massachusetts sometimes are kind of straddling that 4 million megawatt hour line. So that may change in future years and solicitations. So we'll be reviewing the EIA data before releasing solicitations, and we'll be updating the cost share or the small utility set aside as needed.
Does my audio work now?
Yeah, you're back now.
Great. So the reason it ended up at 59% is that it's based on the most recent year's EIA data, based on I believe it's Form 861. So there it's a survey, and we don't have good clarity from DOE on who is included in that survey, but in the most recent year of data, Eversource did not clear that 4 million megawatt hurdle to be considered large. So the only provider in Massachusetts that is considered large is National Grid. And so the remaining, so it's the proportion of their customers over all customers in Massachusetts that are the only portion considered served by a large entity. So, and that all that data is available publicly via, it's table 10 from the EIA 861 data called utility bundled retail sales. So it's just a simple calculation of total customers served by large versus small.
And yes, seeing a comment in the chat, Jonathan, yes, all 40 MLPs in Massachusetts would qualify as small. I know we have some hand raised, so let's turn to those folks and then we can go back to the chat. Michael?
Hey, Karen, how you doing? So my question is related to the types of projects that will be most favorable. In the competitive grant, one of the things that the DOE cited was that they didn't want this to just be viewed as a subsidy for investments that would have been made otherwise. But they also prioritized projects that were quote unquote shovel ready. So those two statements are a bit in conflict with each other. I wondered if you can maybe comment a bit on, looking at that list, like how utilities should be thinking about positioning projects that aren't, quote unquote, business as usual.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, Jacob, would you mind taking us back to the eligible project slide? So our program guidelines haven't contemplated either of those questions directly. But what I can say is that one thing our scoring rubric in the RFP notes is that we are interested in projects that encourage innovation in some way. So that could be innovation in like public-private partnerships, in business models, in like projects that would serve the public good, but wouldn't attract private capital for another reason. I think
that makes sense. That's helpful.
Okay.
Thanks.
Monir?
Yeah, thanks, Corin. This is very helpful. A two-part question. I assume that the way it's supposed to work, if maybe reading between the lines, is that the Mass CEC does the full evaluation and they recommend projects, and DOE sort of has veto rights, I guess, and saying, yeah, you weren't thorough enough here. This doesn't meet a criteria. And then in terms of the 4.2 million versus the 9.3 million, that breakdown, are you able to make, do these have to be restricted to the annual budget? For example, can you make all the awards for both years at this 2024, or does it have to be parsed out according to the years?
No, it doesn't need to be parsed out according to the years. We are sort of able to distribute funding as we get interest and also as we get eligible projects. And then, yeah. Oh, sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
I was just going to add, like, for example, some states are waiting until they accumulate multiple years of funding to open a solicitation so that they can access larger projects with the funding. So it's the funding years are really just how it's being distributed from DOE. It doesn't at all speak to how it needs to be deployed or implemented.
I also had one other sort of amendment to the question is, Mass CEC has added this, they may add another 15% cost share to it. And this is exclusively DOE money that's coming into it. Mass CEC is not adding money to it. So I just wanted to understand what would be the criteria to ask, or give a sense of what would be the type of criteria for increasing the cost match.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way this program works is that, as we've mentioned, subawardees will need to provide a certain cost match, and then the state also has to provide a 15% cost match. So one of the program activities that we undertook back in April was we amended how we would be seeking or providing that cost match, and may pass that cost match on to subawardees based on availability of state funding. So we'll be evaluating projects based on demonstrated need for funding for the project and also available state funds to direct toward the cost match.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Answer some of the questions in the chat as we've had some coming in, and then we'll go back to answering some live questions. Let's see here. Can the match include in-kind services? Yes, cost match can include in-kind services, and there will be a place in the application materials to spell out what type of cost match entities will be providing, where they're securing that cost match, and how much. And then is third-year funding likely? How much? Yes, we are anticipating receiving our third-year award of I can't remember if it's 4.2 or 4.3 million, but somewhere in that range. And we're anticipating receiving that award in the next month or two. All right.
Correct
Mhm.
correct me if I'm wrong, but if we get that third year soon, could we start to distribute that as part of this cycle?
We could, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we would issue basically an update to the RFP if that were to be available. So the next question is sales the energy, which may be from smaller energy brokers, or is it the distribution utility the energy flows through? So I believe it's the energy that the entity applying for the funding directly sells. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, it could be from smaller energy brokers and isn't necessarily tied to the distribution utility. Is that also your understanding of this question, Sarah?
Yeah, I think that's right. It's a little confusing because the EIA data that the small determination is made from is not comprehensive. Not every single potential eligible entity is captured in that data. And so the determination of how someone is small has to be kind of a self-determination and justified based on your own data and information on energy sales. If you're not in the EIA data. And so we can facilitate the kind of confirmation of your self-determination based on or with DOE. We can facilitate that that confirmation.
Yeah, just to give an example of something we've run into in the past that could be helpful, like we had a question from an entity that was applying as, or was interested in applying as like an energy storage developer, and then they had another side of their business that did like community solar and other small scale solar projects, and the sales from that electricity counted toward their electricity sales. But if you have any questions about your determination, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help you figure that out.
I think the biggest point of potential confusion or complication there is that if there's no energy sales, you're considered large. It's not that you're considered having zero. And so, yeah, like that's that cutoff or that like potential to try to become considered small by demonstrating some amount of energy sales is, I think, where the most question you have covered.
All right. The next question we got was what size grants would be typical and how many this year? So we haven't established a minimum or maximum grant amount, and we also have not determined an estimate of how many awards we may give out. We're really interested in seeing what types of projects are proposed. So we encourage you to apply for whatever makes sense for the project that you're interested in. And we will be considering everything as it comes. The next question that we got, I think perhaps was just answered by Sarah's response, but just wanted to reiterate. So the question was, if we generate less than 4 million megawatt hours and do not sell electricity, are we eligible as a large entity? So if there are no electricity sales, entities are considered large as long as they're part of that list of eligible entities. If an entity is eligible and sells less than that 4 million megawatt hour cap, but they do sell some electricity, entities are considered small. So hopefully that answers that question. All right, let's go to Evan.
I think coming through okay with audio?
Yep.
I had a quick question on the cost match. Any federal tax credits stemming from the IRA, are those considered as part of the cost match calculation? Or if, let's just say hypothetically, an end user here applies as a storage operator, they front all the money, but then they receive tax credits according to the associated filing timeline with the IRS. There's a gap there. So, I mean, how does DOE view tax credits that come in after the fact versus the cost share requirement?
This is a great question. I think we will probably need to follow up with our DOE contact on that one. I will say this is one of our first times administering this type of federal funding, so there are a lot of intricacies like this one that we are still in the process of figuring out. But
Okay.
we will definitely reach out and get back to you.
We'll submit a written question on that. And just one more quick one tied to, I think, what Sarah was just saying. So if an end user here doesn't, I guess, what constitutes a sale? Is there a large public university, for example, if they're generating their own power but aren't registered as a CEP, what is the technical definition crossing into a sale?
I think based on so I think it has to be a retail transaction. But that understanding is just based on the type of data that that they designated to use to determine the size cutoffs, because it's based on retail sales.
We'll submit a follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we have a bunch more questions in the chat. So the next question was, are there opportunities for EDC meetups or networking events with clean tech startups to explore potential partnerships that align with the objectives of this program? Alternatively, are EDCs or other eligible entities planning to consider new innovative approaches and engage with startups for potential collaborations? So that's a great question. And it's something we've been thinking a lot about. I think, as I mentioned, we have this goal for projects to be designed in collaboration with communities and also for projects to be innovative. And we're sort of curious if there is a need for facilitation of project partners. So I'm guessing from this question that there is interest in something like that. But we're very curious if you have any feedback about what would be helpful, what that could look like. I know we have about 2.5 months until projects are due. So it's kind of a tight timeline, but if there is something that would be helpful for you all, please let us know and we'll do our best to facilitate something.
It's also an aspect that we could integrate into the program for future iterations as well. If something like that takes more time to facilitate those partnerships or conversations, and those are things that will develop over a multiple-month timeline. We're happy to help provide that forum support, help make those connections, and provide the ability to do that.
Okay. All right. The next question was, is the 4 million megawatt hour threshold that determines small versus large retail sales, wholesale sales, or either? I suspect it would be either. Sarah, I'm not sure if you have a sense of
I believe it's retail sales.
Retail sales, okay. But we can definitely confirm and get back to you with that one. Would an electricity supplier participating in community choice aggregation be an eligible grantee? So I think there are a couple parts to this question. Eligible entities must either fall into the list that we showed earlier. Jacob, maybe if you could pull that list back up. Or request designation by the Secretary of DOE, and also be proposing an eligible project. In terms of determining small versus large, that's perhaps getting more at your question about electricity sales. Sarah, do you want to jump in and add to that?
No, I don't think I.
Okay.
So sorry
Um, can an entity apply multiple times with different projects? We're not putting any caps on the number of applications that folks can submit, whether folks can apply in different rounds. I think, yeah, we're interested to see what folks propose.
I think maybe a helpful way of framing that or helping to speak to that is one of the in the RFP materials, note that one of the primary evaluation criteria handed down from DOE is selecting projects that provide the most benefit. And so that should be a consideration in how projects are sized, scoped, and framed. So that can help to maybe speak to how like a project with large demonstrable benefits to especially the particular communities noted in the RFP will be very strong applications and be in good contention for consideration of an award. So just to the extent that helps provide some framing around kind of to be strategic about kind of various scopes or sizes of requests, that is a driving consideration in the selection process.
Hopefully that also answers the next question, which was, given that there is not a current minimum or maximum, do you recommend submitting more than one application? But please let us know if we haven't sufficiently addressed your question. Next question, do you have an application form that can be used by applicants, or should we follow the application format you outlined in the presentation? Yes, so there are a collection of application forms that are available on our website that applicants can download, fill out, and submit as part of their application. So all of those forms, both the Mass CEC and federal requirements, are available to download and fill out. And we would ask that folks take that approach. All right, next question. Would this provide an incentive to a homeowner who has energy storage? If so, can you give an example as to what the incentive would be for a 10 kilowatt energy storage customer of our solar installation company? So I suspect that the answer is probably not, because I think the homeowner would have to make the argument that they're both an electricity storage provider, and that they would be pursuing some sort of eligible project with their energy storage system. It might be helpful to note that I think in the sort of like DOE conception of this project, I think it is largely being pursued in a lot of other jurisdictions, like by utility companies and also by like larger energy storage providers. I think that's all the questions we've received so far. Really appreciate all of the engagement. Are there other questions, comments? Great. Okay. I've got another one. When looking at projects that benefit underserved communities, what data are you using to determine what community is underserved? I have seen the 2024 disadvantaged community tier designation figure. That's a great question. We're using two different designations. So applicants can either use the environmental justice designation in the state of Massachusetts, or they can use the disadvantaged community designation established by DOE. I'm not sure if it's exactly the one that you've mentioned there, but there is a link in the RFP to the specific like designation from DOE that we're using. Yes, Manir.
Corin, just on that particular point, is that they can differ. There
Yes.
are areas where the EJ screen, has designated areas that are not in Massachusetts, but much more often it's an area in Massachusetts that is not on the EJ screen. So, I mean, folks should be aware, and that's very helpful to know that we can use the Massachusetts version because the EPA EJ screen is much more limited overall. I also, while I have the floor, I'll just throw out there, I just put into the chat that we do have a group at Greentown Labs that we administer called the REIC, Resilient Energy and Infrastructure Consortium. It's been around actually for 4 years, and it's exactly for the purpose of connecting emerging innovative climate tech startups with project developers in this energy area of exactly this nature. So my email address is in there for folks who are interested and who aren't aware of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Manir. I just put a link in the chat to the DOE definition that we'll be using. And I will just copy and paste in the Massachusetts environmental justice community definition. And like I said, these are also referenced in the posted RFP, and we can include them as well in the answers to the questions we'll be posting. Yes, to Gary's question, will these questions have written responses posted as well? Yes, we are transcribing all of the questions that folks have been asking verbally, and we'll also have a record of everything posted in the chat, and we'll be including these questions and all of the responses in the Q&A document. Oh, great question. Is this grant under the same umbrella as the federal GRIP grant that closed back in April? If so, is it acceptable to submit an application for a project that we already submitted for potential funding under that funding opportunity? Fantastic question. So yes, they're under the same umbrella in that they were both established by Section 40101 of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and they're both being administered by the Grid Deployment Office of DOE. So they're sort of under like the same general funding umbrella. And because of that, applicants cannot submit applications for projects to both funding opportunities. So the distinction there is that if an application has been submitted to the GRIP funding opportunity, they cannot submit the same project to the 40101D application. If an applicant is interested in submitting projects with separate scopes, they could submit one to the GRIP program and one to this 40101D grid resilience program. The key distinction is that they can't have the same scope and objectives.
And I believe it would be DOE would make the final determination as to whether the scopes are sufficiently distinct from one another. And there's questions in the application materials where you need to disclose and provide copies of GRIP applications if there is if you have a group application out there.
Some other questions? All right, well, we are, like I said, accepting written questions about the RFP through the end of the day. So please feel free to send questions our way and we will get responses out in the next week and a half. I'm also happy to stay on if anyone has a question that they want to ask about something not in front of the group. But thank you so much for all of your engagement. We really appreciate it. And we're really excited to see the applications that you all submit. So if at any point anything is confusing or if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at grid@masscec.com. We're happy to try to answer questions and be as helpful as possible. All right, I think we can go ahead and stop the recording. Thanks, everyone.